From the high desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be, continent to continent, across the oceans, all around the world. This program, Coast to Coast AM, covers every bit of the territory around the world, one way or the other. Good evening. I'm Art Bell, filling in for George Norrie, taking a well-deserved night off. And let me give you fair warning ahead of time. We're going to do something a little bit special tonight. And what I'm going to do is hold it until the second half hour so that those of you who would like to record it, actually, it's only a piece of it. It kind of went on and on. It is, and we have never replayed this to the best of my knowledge, it is the infamous, if you will, a story of a man who flew over Area 51. And I think this occurred back in 1997. Now, that's just my best guess, but I think it was 97. And you've just never heard anything like it in your life. It's about almost 12 minutes long. And I know a lot of people have been wanting to record this or get a copy of it one way or the other. So the network was kind enough after somebody requested. This is by request. Somebody called the show last week and requested that we dig it up and play it, and so we shall. We'll make it in the second half hour here. Let's take a brief look at the depressing world news. President Bush talks about Iraq war plan and Saddam. President Bush said Thursday he wished the execution of Saddam Hussein had gone in a more dignified way. President Bush also said he'll make a speech next week announcing his long-awaited decisions about how to proceed in the unpopular war in Iraq. Considering more troops to deal with the rising violence in Baghdad, Bush said one thing's for absolute certain. He didn't say absolute, for certain, he said. I'll want to make sure the mission is clear and specific and can be accomplished. Something we should have done before we went in, right? Senior generals have cautioned against sending additional troops unless their role is well defined. Well, it's happened. In a day of ceremony and historic change, Representative Nancy Pelosi became the nation's first female House Speaker on Thursday, as Democrats eagerly took control of Congress for the final 2 years of the president's term, probably making life rather miserable for the president. Democrats are back, said Pelosi, and she immediately set the rank and file to work, passing tougher ethics rules. Energy Secretary Samuel Bodman on Thursday dismissed the chief of the country's nuclear weapons program because of security breakdowns at the Los Alamos, New Mexico lab and other facilities. The number of death sentences handed out in the U.S. dropped in 2006 to the lowest level since capital punishment actually was reinstated 30 years ago. Wow. Reflecting what some experts say is a growing fear that the criminal justice system will make a tragic and irreversible mistake. Executions fell, too, to the fewest in a decade. President Bush has chosen a 25-year Intel veteran, Vice Admiral Mike McConnell, to be our nation's second National Intelligence Director, as he reshapes national security strategy with 2 years left in his presidency. In a case fraught with ethical questions, this story is really weird. The parents of a severely mentally and physically disabled child have stunted her growth to keep their little pillow angel a manageable and more portable size. The bedridden 9-year-old girl had her uterus and breast tissues removed at a Seattle hospital and received large doses of hormones to halt her growth. She is now 4'5". Her parents say she would otherwise probably reach a normal 5'6" or so. J-Lo honored by People Espanol. And she deserves it. I really like Jennifer Lopez. I always have. She's among entertainers selected by People Espanol for its 100 Most Influential Hispanics issue, which honors those who have made an impact in the Hispanic community. Lopez, who graces the cover of the magazine's February issue on newsstands Friday, says, quote, being an example to others is a big part of my work. And I must say, she really is something. I've seen a number of her movies lately, and she's just a joy. Just an absolute joy. All right, listen, the webcam shot tonight is of Ms. Aaron Bell. Mrs. Aaron Bell, actually. Right here, taken a few hours earlier. And you'll notice she has a pillow covering her somewhat protruding stomach. Actually, she's not showing that much yet, but you can indeed begin to see it. So in a moment, in the next hour, Whitley Strieber is going to be here, and he's going to be talking about what Whitley and I have always talked about, and that is the weather. In a moment, we'll look at a little of the rest of the news, as Paul would say. Dateline Chicago. I love this. Federal officials say it was probably just some weird weather phenomenon. But a group of United Airlines employees swear they saw a mysterious saucer-shaped craft hovering over O'Hare Airport last fall. We're just hearing about this now. The workers, some of them pilots, so they'd know what they're seeing, right, said the object didn't have lights, and it hovered over an airport terminal before shooting up through the clouds, according to a report in Monday's Chicago Tribune. The Federal Aviation Administration acknowledged a United supervisor, in fact, had called the control tower at O'Hare, asking, had anyone spotted a spinning disc-shaped object? But the controllers didn't see anything. And a preliminary check of radar found nothing out of the ordinary. Quote, our theory on this is it was a weather phenomena, said Corey. He's a FAA spokeswoman, actually, Elizabeth Corey. The night was a perfect atmospheric condition in terms of low cloud ceiling and lots of airport lights. When lights shine up into the clouds, why, sometimes you can see funny things, said she. The FAA shall not investigate, said she. United spokeswoman Megan McCarthy said company officials don't recall discussing any such incident from November 7th. There's a lot of non-recollection there, isn't there? In the months of October, November, and December of 77, and during the first half of 78, the Brazilian state of Pará, is it Pará? Has been invaded, I would think Pará, has been invaded by UFOs. And it was not simply sightings. Nothing to do with mysterious lights wandering at high altitudes, more about bright objects in several shapes and sizes flying over the Bay region at low altitude, just, in fact, meters above the trees and firing strong beams of lights at people. The people harmed by the phenomena, one of the most important ones of the world's ufology studies, and still, in fact, being researched nowadays, gave several names to the silent bright objects: vampire light, bug, the thing, and mainly Chupa Chupa, the sucker. I guess from Chupacabra, right? They said the object pilots were beings with a height of 1.2 or 1.3 meters. That's small. The people called it Chupa Chupa because of the weird scars the victims bore on their bodies. The light beam used to leave the tiny holes on the skin. Among women, the scars were on their breasts. They seemed to lose blood during the attack. Men and women complained of giddiness, body numbing, and headache after the attacks. The inhabitants of the cities of Claris, San Antonio, and others panicked on these days of bitter remembrance. The panic took over even the state's capital with a sequence of strange light reports and Chupa Chupa attacks in several quarters of the city, astonishing the local authorities. Chupa Chupa, that's interesting. In the end of the 70s, Scientists from all over the world came to Brazil, where they failed to explain anything. 27 years later, documents from the Brazilian Air Force's Secret Service are now revealing these lights from space were something much more unsettling than we can imagine. The explanation of the phenomena is there is none. It is still a big mystery, a huge challenge to the science and the Air Force. Experts, ufologists, scientists, and researchers from Brazilian universities are collecting signatures. In fact, a petition that will be delivered to the Brazilian president. It requires the Air Force to reveal conclusions of the investigation of the Chupa Chupa case. Well, I'm sure there'll be great difficulty in recollection, but we'll see. At first, it simply looked like an ugly oil slick. But as the crew of the yacht Macon sailed closer to a brown patch on the ocean near Tonga, out in the Pacific, they suddenly realized they were observing something far rarer and more beautiful. What looked like a brown stain on the Pacific turned out, in fact, to be a spectacular drift of floating pumice stones, stretching more than, in fact, 16 kilometers. Wow. And an indication an island was being born right before their eyes. After navigating a course toward steam clouds on the horizon, can you imagine being on this boat? The crew of the yacht was treated to the sight of lava spewing up from the ocean to create new land where previously there had been none. One of the very few people to witness firsthand volcanic activity creating an island, crew member Frederick Franson last week told of his experience during a stopover in Brisbane. His account has volcanologists vibrating. Franson, a Swede who lives in the U.S., was traveling from San Francisco to Australia in August when the Macon chanced upon the floating pumice, which was later photographed by NASA with a satellite. The pumice initially appeared to be an oil spill, but as the yacht drew closer, it proved to be thick. In fact, about 18 kilometers across. The sight was unbelievable, he said. It looked like rolling sand dunes as far as the eye could see. So I guess in a way, you're seeing God in the creative mode. This is the stuff of science fiction. But a respected American surgeon says that within 5 years, are you ready for this? Within 5 years, he's going to be able to graft wings and, if you wish it, a tail onto human beings. Johan Hari on the bizarre world of radical plastic surgery. Dr. Joe Rosen is not a quack. He works at the acclaimed Dartmouth Medical Center, and he's been a scientific advisor to NASA, so, he's right on up there. He's fond of making statements like this: human wings will be here, mark my words. He believes, in all seriousness, that within 5 years he's going to be able to graft wings onto a human being's body. This is possible because our brains adapt to create new neural maps for new body parts. When we have a limb amputated, our neural map of that limb gradually fades away, and if we gain a body part, our neural map expands accordingly. If I were to give you wings, you would develop literally a winged brain. Our bodies change our brains, and our brains are infinitely moldable, said Rosen. Surgical techniques already exist, which can be used to stretch torso fat and rejig rib bones to create a wing. Though no human would be able to fly, he thinks, they would resemble angels and have full sensations in their new hanging bone flaps of flesh. Rosen has designed blueprints. This is the new world of radical plastic surgery, where Rosen is Moses. He would not be content to settle merely for wings either. He's got his mind set on cochlear implants to enhance human hearing. Already doing that, right? raising as it does the prospect of superhuman soldiers and even humans with tails. I wonder what would we use a tail for anyway? However, I'm kind of interested, always have been, in wings. Now, why he doesn't necessarily think we could fly, perhaps with a little training, well, you never know. If our brains really adapt to the wings, and the wings develop, and they're big enough and develop sufficient muscular ability, why, we might be able to fly. Now, if you were promised the ultimate ability, if you really worked out a lot, or whatever you do when you get wings, would you take wings? I might do it. I think we could squeeze a call or so in here. Remember, coming up after the bottom of the hour, we're going to replay the infamous Area 51 pilot, the guy who flew into Area 51. But first, west of the Rockies, Jamie, you are on the air.
Yes, Art. How are you doing tonight?
I'm spiffy.
Good, good. Listen, Popular Science magazine this month, January, and I read More Time. You got it. Clocks are springing forward 3 weeks early in March 11th and fall back a week late this year. Have you heard about this?
No.
No, you haven't. Wow.
No.
Yes,
I have not.
Yes. Well, this is part of the Energy Policy Act of 2005, and their whole thing is it should save the energy equivalent of 100,000 barrels of oil a day. And it's going to happen this year.
Now, let me get this straight. They're going to change time early?
And we're going to get a month of daylight savings time.
Why in the hell don't they just get rid of the change altogether?
Well, because it's going to save us $100,000 a barrel.
Well, no. You're missing my point. Leave it that way all year long.
Well, I agree. I agree with you, Art. I just found it interesting that this is going to happen this year.
I mean, aren't you sick of changing clocks?
Well, actually, some of the clocks are supposed to change on their own nowadays.
Well, yeah,
but there are
some
that don't. Yes, you're right.
That's right.
So
I say it's a great idea, but, I mean, doing it a month early just moves the pain of changing the clocks a month.
I know. Well, a lot of people don't really realize that this is going to happen, and I just wanted to put it out to everybody.
Okay, well, I guess we'll just have to spring forward a little early.
And listen, this year, tornadoes are going to touch down in L.A.
L.A.?
Yes. Just wanted to put that in. I wasn't able to get in on your prediction, but I know I'm not going to be on the record.
Well, no, you're not. But in the world of weather, buddy, nothing surprises me. We're having like 30 and 40 mile an hour winds here in the desert right now. It's screaming out there.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It's totally different out here this year.
All right, you take care.
Okay, you too, Art.
See you later. That was Jamie in California. California's been having the same kind of winds. I mean, just absolutely screeching away out there. East of the Rockies, Jeff in Missouri.
Thank you for taking my call. Happy New Year.
And the very same to you.
Nothing has really... First, have you heard of the North American Union?
Yes.
I think this Congress is going to try to pass that. It's the type of organization, that socialist organization, that Democrats go for.
Well, what the Congress passes, the president can pass on.
Yeah, but he met with Vicente Fox and then President Vicente Fox and the Canadian Prime Minister in Mexico back in March and signed what was the early steps is the Security, Prosperation, and Protection Act.
Yeah, it's probably inevitable. I mean, it is inevitable, I'm sure.
And I think one of the reasons the government doesn't like the Minutemen is they would be a threat to them if they try to pull that off.
Well, they already are. They're a threat to that whole concept.
Yeah, I think that's the Minutemen would be is a well-organized force already to prevent anything like that from happening.
I don't have a clue why we don't protect our borders. I don't have a clue.
Because that's one of the goals of. Because that will be one of the. That's what keep the borders open like it is will help speed forward that North American Union,
Huh.
especially that super highway they're trying to build.
Yeah, but aren't they supposed to be fighting a war on terror?
Yeah. But what
Well,
happens
it's some
if that,
kind of cherry-picking war, I'll tell you.
Yeah, what if that war on terror comes home? And
Exactly. All right, sir, listen, I'm short on time. I got to scoot, but I certainly agree with you. Coming up after the break, shortly after the break, after the bottom of the hour, we're going to play back the famous, the infamous guy who flew into Area 51. And if you want to hear what happened to him, you never did hear it, keep your radio exactly where it is right now. I'm Art Bell. Last fact, from the high desert, that's where we are. I keep getting these notes from people saying, where's your webcam? Well, it does move around a little bit. Right now, if you go to coasttocoastam.com and you look at the middle of the page and scroll down just a little bit, you'll see where it says Art's Webcam. Click here. Not too hard. Once again, middle of the page, just go down to where it says Art's Webcam and click there. And there's a photograph of Aaron taking, I don't know, a couple hours ago. Now, in a moment, and actually I want to hear it again myself. We had a time on this show back, I think, in 97, when a guy phoned me up in an airplane getting ready to fly right into Area 51. And if I recall correctly, and I think I do, I really tried to talk him out of it. But it's been a long time, and I'd kind of like to hear it myself. So hopefully you have prepared your tape recorders, recording equipment, whatever, because this really is a very rare clip. Coming up in a moment, the man who took on Area 51. All right, I'm still getting notes saying the webcam isn't there. Yes, it is. Now, what may be happening is that your system is using cache. In other words, your own computer stores some cache, and you've got to get rid of that. You go in, and there's a way to go in, depending on what browser you're using, and eliminate the cache. Then it will be forced to reload the new information. That's the only reason I can imagine you would not be finding it. All right. What you are about to hear is classic Coast to Coast AM, to be sure. It's a long time ago, I think, 1997. The first thing you're going to hear is this man, his girlfriend, sent me a fax. It was back in the day when I took faxes directly. And apparently she was urging me to clear out a line so that I could get his call. Now, I remember the girlfriend. In fact, after the whole thing, we got other faxes from the girlfriend because, well, I don't want to give away what's going to happen. Let's go ahead and play the clip and roll your recorders right now. Network, roll it. I'm going to read you a fax that I've got here, and I would like everybody to not call my wildcard line. Please, if you're calling the wildcard line, hang up, and I'm going to tell you why. Here's what I've got. Art, answer the wildcard line. My boyfriend is in a small plane north of Las Vegas and is ready to fly into Area 51. He has been trying to call you by cell phone. Now, it's signed by a name, and I'm not going to give that name, so I will know when the right person calls me on the phone. But whether or not you're able to get through to me, I would like to tell you that two things may occur if you try to fly into Area 51. One, you will be forced down and interrogated and probably arrested as the least case. Or worst case, you will be shot down. And so I'm telling you, you should not do this. But if you're already in the air and you really want to call in, you go ahead and call me now on the wildcard line. And if you verify the person who signed their name here at the bottom, I will verify you as the person who sent the fax or the boyfriend of that person, and I will put you on the air. Again, let me tell you, Art, answer the wildcard line. My boyfriend is in a small plane north of Las Vegas, ready to fly into Area 51. He's been trying to call you by cell phone. And here he is. You're on the air. Hello.
Hello there. Is this Art Bell?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yeah, my name, I won't give you my last name.
Okay, wait a minute, sir. Hold on. The fax is signed by somebody named who?
Jill.
Jill. That is correct. So you are the one.
That's my girlfriend.
Yes, sir. Where are you?
Well, I'm up here from Fort Worth in my little airplane. It's a long sea I built myself. It's a Burt Rutan design with a Ford Canard. I'm not sure if you know the kind. It's an experimental aircraft.
No, I'm not.
Classified that, but not anymore.
No, tell me about it. What kind of airplane is it?
Well, it's a long easy. It's got 120 horsepower like homing in it, but we had it board stroked and fixed it up a little bit. It usually flies around 140 to 160 indicated airspeed. I'm right now at 7,000 feet. You know where this place called Indian Springs is?
Indian Springs, yes.
Yeah. Well, I've been flying now for about 49 minutes here between Beatty, is that what you call it, and Indian Springs. And I figure I'll just go on up here and try to get into this Area 51. I'm right south of this Nevada test site, or Nellis Air Force Base.
Listen.
And I'm right outside this restricted zone.
Listen to me. When you fly into that zone,
yeah,
they are going to either force you down or shoot you down. Don't you know that?
Well, you know, I've been in a lot of Air Force bases, and I'm in the Air Force for many years. I'm an ex-Air Force, but I'm just going to tell you that, you know, as American citizen, we have the right to know what's up there in this Area 51. And I've been listening to you boys talk about this. Hold on here, I'm making a turn. Just a second here. And I'm going to go on up there and see what's going on. And I just wanted to let you know about that before I do that, don't you know?
How long do you estimate it's going to be before you...
I figure about 12, 14 minutes. I can crank this baby up a little bit here. Let's do that. Let's crank this thing on up. We got some pretty good mountains here off to my west, don't you know? I'm turning up north right now, and I can see the Air Force Base out there in the distance. It's got 3 runways. It looks like they're all lit up. And A-shaped. Looks like north-south. Got a lot of desert up here, don't you, boys?
A lot of desert, yes.
A lot of desert up here.
You're liable to get yourself killed.
I'm sorry, sir. You have to speak a little loud. I cranked this engine all the way up here. I
said you're liable to get yourself killed.
Well, we'll get up there in a few minutes, yeah, and we're just going to see what's going to happen, because this is I've got Red Crosses painted on this baby, and I got hospital on it, see? And maybe they're going to think that I'm on some kind of a mercy flight, and I'm just off course. And I've got the radios cut off, so you can have radio failure, don't you know? And so I'm going to hold this thing steady here, about around 65, 6,800 feet.
Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?
I want to get to the bottom of this. I'm a American. My family has been American for years, and I want to get down in here, and I want to find out what's happening.
All right, then why are you doing it at night?
Because that's the best way to get in here.
But even if you manage to overfly the area,
I'm in the restricted zone. I just entered the restricted zone. I see a bunch of lights out there. It's like some kind of a searchlight coming on.
You're in the restricted zone now?
I just crossed that restricted zone. I'm going to drop this baby down.
I'm telling you, you're going to get shot down.
Hold on here now. I got my pressure suit on. I don't really need one of this kind of aircraft. It's not like a jet, but it helps when I make some tight turns here. And I'm going to cut down here. Now, let's see what these boys are going to do. I don't see anybody coming up here yet. I just see a bunch of lights. But I'm pretty far from that Area 51. I figure about another 8-9 minutes here. And it's hard to calculate it right now trying to talk to you. I'm trailing an antenna out here about 30 feet so I can keep this phone conversation. If we get cut off, then... But I'm going to go up here and see what's going on. They say there's a bunch of UFOs and there's all kind of things out here. And I want to get this baby right down here about 1,000 feet. And we're going to see if there's any UFOs or anything out here, what's going on.
Listen, I think you're making a mistake.
Well, sir, I might be, but, our tax dollars pay for all this. And these boys, they've been hiding everything under all this black projects and all this great funding and all this kind of thing.
Sir, hold it. Don't you think that we have a right to national security secrets?
I think we have, not really, because you know they have these K-11 and K-15 satellites up there, and the Ruskies, they know what we're doing, and the Chinese, they've got satellites down here. They know what's going on. The only thing that don't know what's going on is the common folk like me and you, and us common folk got a right to know because we're funding all this.
How long have you been planning this?
I got this thing down here about 1,000 feet. I've been planning this thing now. I'm right on the deck, not quite on the deck. I'm at 1,000 feet. Boy, they got light bulbs popping up everywhere. I'm telling you, they got searchlights. There's about 4 of them out here. And I've been planning this now for, anywhere from a month to 6 weeks. It took me a while to paint up the plane because I had to use that Imron. The only thing but stick to this gel coat I got on this thing. This thing's built out of Kevlar and carbon fiber. I got it stressed 8G positive, 10G negative. It's overbuilt. I tell you what, I'm going to get down here and squirm like a little frog that's been stepped on by a big dog when I get down here. In a few minutes here, I'll tell you that. Because I'm not going to... Hey, looks like there's a F-16 coming up here.
I wouldn't be surprised. You're making a mistake.
He's scrambling somebody down there. He's got some afterburners on because I can see him. He's about 5 miles out. That old boy is cranking. Yes, sir. And I see something opening up here on the ground. I'm pretty low now. I'm starting to pick up all kind of buildings down here. I see something here is level with the ground, and they're opening this thing up. There looks like something's coming up out of that. I can't tell you what it is. It must be on some kind of a. Hold on here. I got to make this turn.
All right.
I think this old boy's going to head up here for me.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, he's going to be up here right directly because he's in the F-16. Sure as hell. He's coming. Hold on here.
I would advise you to turn your.
We can do this.
I would advise you to turn on your radio.
Come on, baby. Come on, baby. Come on, baby. We can do this now. Come on here. Hold on. This old boy's coming up here. Now he's got his lights. He's got his lights on and he's flashing me.
Yeah, he's probably.
All right, I'm waving at him. No radio. No radio. No radio. He don't know that.
Well, if I were you, I'd turn it on.
These folks are listening to Art Bell because everybody listens to Art Bell. Oh,
well, maybe if you're making.
I got to get some airspeed.
You're making a bad calculation because if they're not listening, you're going to be shot down.
I don't know what he's going to do here. He's rocking his wings at me right now. He's rocking his wings and he's cutting in front of me. And you know this. Oh, don't cut in front of me now, because if he cuts that close, stay off. Stay off. He get his vortex from his engine, from Pratt & Whitney engine. We're going to, just like twin tornadoes, if he gets too close, stay off, boy. Hold on there. I'm getting down on the deck. I'm going in. I'm getting down there. He ain't going to get me. I bet them veterans ain't going to get me there. They didn't get me over there. They're not going to get me over here now. Looks like some kind of rail guns coming up out of that elevator, that flat area over there that the doors opened up. It's got some kind of a weird-looking barrel on it with a light. And, oh, hell, they're doing something. They're shooting at me now. Oh, God. No, baby, I'm going in. I think I'm going in.
And I can tell you this. He was never heard from again. We heard from his girlfriend. We had some follow-up faxes. But as far as I know, that man is just plain missing. He's gone. So there it was. That was the infamous Area 51 flight. And nary another word, not one other word in all these years. So I can only presume, you can presume the following. One, it was a hoax. None of the listeners at the time, now some of the audio is not quite what it was. You could certainly hear the engines, and you could hear a kind of a whine that is associated with transmissions made that way, and you could hear a number of things that made most of my listeners at the time respond that they thought it was genuine. So it could be a hoax, or he could have been shot down and be dead as a doornail, or he could have been captured, I suppose, and had his life threatened in any number of ways, should he ever say anything. So I have no way of knowing what the follow-up is on that, or was. There simply was none. All right, back to the lines, west of the Rockies. You are on the air, Jim in Washington.
Good evening. Boy, that's quite a recording.
Yes, it is.
Oh, man. Well, that's too bad about the guy.
Yes, it is, but you can't say I didn't warn him.
That's true. That's true. That was silly on his part, frankly.
I think so.
Hey, last night, they were talking about MRSA, that I want to say staphylococcus. It's not it's a staph infection.
Yes.
They were saying that they haven't been able to find, or the strongest antibiotic doesn't seem to work. I get these newsletters. I subscribe to them, and one of them suggested using honey, making a poultice out of honey, and wrapping the wound with this poultice and applying honey to it. And they seem to indicate that it worked pretty good of stopping this staph infection.
Maybe, but it spreads very, very, very quickly. And by the way, it's not the only thing that is immune to all the known antibiotics we have right now. There are more and more infections and things that are simply immune to the very latest. We try and make, every time we run into something new, we try and get a new antibiotic that will kill it. But I just have this sinking feeling that nature is going to win this particular battle as time goes on. One never knows. Science is doing its very best, but 'tis not easy. And in the end, it may be the little things that get us. Let's go to a wildcard line. Say, Richard in New York, you're on the air.
Hey, Art, good to talk to you. That was quite a recording you played.
Yes, sir, it was.
Welcome back, and Happy New Year and all that good stuff. I called because I was setting up my little C. Crane VersaCorder to record your program. I usually don't stay up this late. And I know you've been talking a lot about the Chicago lights, you know, that they saw.
Yes.
And I set it by Fox News, and the O'Reilly report was on. And he's got a little section on his thing where he takes, like, you know, wacko stories, crazy stories, and he says, by the way, he said, as to those lights in the sky, he said, supposedly they saw lights over Chicago, and he said, I don't think any flying saucers could land there because they have trouble landing planes there. And he said also there are lights over Colorado and Nevada, which the news said today, all these lights are a Russian spaceship that broke up, and no debris hit the ground except for a single chunk in Nevada.
Please.
So he lumped the two together. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's just really. I mean, they try and try and try to just get the general public to get. You know, it's funny. On one hand, they let all this stuff on the History Channel and stuff, if they're controlling the media, saying that. You know, all these things about the Roswell that's in Canada and the Roswell in Mexico and the Roswell in England and all this different stuff about flying saucers, and that's on the media. But when it comes to a legitimate report where hundreds of people actually saw these lights over Chicago, it's played off like a little, you know.
And everybody begins to have severe memory problems.
Yeah, I got a feeling I didn't get in on your lines to you know, make predictions because it didn't come to me psychically or anything, but I have a really strong feeling that in 2007, sometime this year, we're going to get definitive proof, not definitive proof, I would say irrefutable proof of either a UFO or a USO, you know, an undersea one.
Yeah.
That's going to be seen by a cruise ship, or it's going to be something flying so low that there'll be such a mass sighting, like they had in Mexico, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, United Airline pilots, mind you, swear they saw a mysterious, quoting here, saucer-shaped craft hovering over O'Hare, but everybody else has memory problems. They don't recollect anything about that. They didn't see anything like that. From the high desert, the great American Southwest in the darkness. How you doing, everybody? I am Art Bell. Coming up, Whitley Strieber. He's the author of many best-selling novels and works of nonfiction, and 4 movies that have been made from his books. Most recently, the 2004 mega hit The Day After Tomorrow, based on the novel Superstorm, written by Whitley and some radio host. Among his best-known novels are The Wolfen and The Hunger, which were both made into films, and, of course, the mega bestseller about his own close encounters, Communion. His most recent book, The Greys, is a thriller about what happens when aliens land. It is now being made into a film by Sony Pictures. Did you know that? In 1999, he co-produced with Mark Wolper a special for NBC based on his book Confirmation. At present, he and Mark are both producing a remake of Wolfen for A&E. His website, unknowncountry.com, is the most popular edge science website in the world. His weekly internet radio program, Dreamland, is among the most popular of all internet broadcasts. That's fact. Dreamland. So happy to see it continue. What a program. Coming up in just a moment, Whitley Strieber. Well, all right, as promised, here is Whitley Strieber. Hey, Whit.
Well, Art, welcome back, and welcome to Aaron, too. It's great that you guys are back in the United States. I have to tell you that. I'm very excited to come up and see you as soon as we can.
Thank you so very much, Whit. Well, I said when I left that I would spend anywhere between 8 months and a year there and make a decision, and that's exactly what I did. And, of course, we did all the paperwork to properly immigrate Aaron. And so we were giving it a shot here, and we'll see how we like it. Now, the desert right now is screaming. We're getting 40, 45-mile-an-hour gusts of wind again. And it's just really wicked, Whitley. I'm telling you, it's wicked here. Listen, before we dive into the weather, I've got a fast blast from Daniel here in Ohio who said, is Whitley still visited by the Greys? When was his last encounter with them? Could you get him to speak just a little bit about the Greys tonight?
Well, sure. I don't think I've had a close encounter in quite a long time. You know, that when I left New York State in 1997, the experience sort of followed me, but then didn't. There was not much after that. There was a close encounter of some sort. I've never known whether exactly what it was happening in June of 1999, and I wrote a little book about it called The Key, but it was with a person who just had a really remarkable mind and a way of, they showed up at my hotel room in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning, and which was pretty impressive because nobody, how did they know I was even there? I had thought I'd been confused and thought it was a room service waiter, and it turned out to be this guy that had some extraordinary things to say, which, as I say, I recorded in this book, and I'd never known who or what he was. I've never been able to find him since then, and that's really the last big thing that happened.
Whitley, I not very long ago interviewed a remarkable man who had. We spent 5 hours. I extended the show to 5 hours. It was an abduction experience. Did you catch that program?
Yeah, I might have. Who was this?
I think his name was Jim Sparks. Jim Sparks,
yes, I'm familiar with this case, and in fact, I think I've interviewed Jim myself. If not, Linda has on my show.
Okay, it's remarkable. He is a remarkable man with a remarkable memory.
Well, he has a better memory of it than anyone I've known. There is another man that Linda just recently interviewed for us. The interview will be appearing on Dreamland, I believe, next week or the week after. Who is a lawyer, and apparently a very prominent lawyer, who interviewed anonymously, who also, like Jim Sparks, has got extensive memories of what happened to him, and most people really don't. I didn't. My first experience with this thing was an abduction, or the first one I remembered. Let me put it that way. In late 1985. but then after that, for the next 11 years, there was no, I don't remember any abductions at all. It was a lot of, I went out in the woods and encountered them, and I used to have groups of people up at the cabin, and there would be group encounters, you know, where they would come and there'd be 10 or 12 people there, and that was the sort of thing that we did there, and they seemed to be connected somehow with that immediate area. In other words, when you left there, they didn't follow you. It was very odd. I was left wondering what they really were. I'll give you an example. A lady called Raven Dana, who's spoken about it publicly, who had an encounter in our house, said at first she had the feeling that it was like a little animal. And that was exactly the way I would feel when they were around me, because even though after a few seconds you would see this was no animal that we know in our world, it wasn't, when you're face-to-face with them and you're totally conscious, they're not. They just seem they're not very human at all, let me put it that way. There's not a lot about them. You would not think of them as being something that came out of a UFO or even possessed a spaceship. And yet, you know, what are they? And where did they come from? How could anything look like that? And then suddenly it touches you or looks into your eyes, and it's like opening up the soul of God or something. It's appalling.
All right, well, it's very intriguing to me that they are territorial. In other words, one would imagine and does imagine they're interested in genetic research. They're following people, even families, from generation to generation. So
they do seem to be.
Yes, okay, then why in the world, if you move, would they not move with you?
Well, you know, I think in many cases they do move with people, because one of the things we learned very quickly when we were in touch with a lot of abductees is that these were people on the move. They didn't stay in one place very long. When you were communicating with a group of 2,000 or 3,000 abductees, you'd have like 40% of them moving house every year. They would not stay in the same place, and this was because they would get relief from it, and they would move, and for a few months it would be fun, and it would start happening again, and they would move again.
But they didn't follow you.
They didn't follow me. Absolutely not. They did not follow me. They tried to follow me, but they did not, and it did not work. There were a couple of incidents when we moved down to Texas, pretty intense, but over time it gradually faded.
All right. Well, Jim Sparks' line of thinking, Whit, is that the Greys are not from another planetary system somewhere, but probably from our own future. And my God, it made so much sense to me when you look at their line of investigation and what they're doing. And you look at what we're doing right now. You can well imagine that in the future, the human race may slowly morph into something not so pleasant. Mr. Sparks made reference to the fact that 1 in 166 children now, and all of a sudden I'm seeing it on the news, incidentally, on CNN, and everybody else is talking about autism, how bad it is. It was 1 in 10,000, then it was 1 in 5,000, and a few years later it's 1 in 166. That's a big change.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's there was a story on our website a couple of weeks ago about that, to the effect that, that apparently some scientists have discovered that it's essentially there's a gene in certain people that makes them susceptible as children to heavy metal poisoning, and so these kids were being affected by the mercury that used to be a preservative in vaccines. And whether there are more people being born with that gene or there's more heavy metal pollution around, which is probably the case, I don't know. But yeah, we could morph into something completely different over time, obviously. But, you know, I have a feeling, I've often thought, when, you know, there's always something about these experiences with them that takes it into a kind of another realm, and you're left. Well, like for example, when we had people up to the house, and I would warn people, don't touch them because it's a very big allergic reaction, and some people would touch them, and they would, their faces would get all puffed up the next day, and I thought it was dangerous. I had epinephrine injectors all over the house so that in case somebody went into anaphylactic shock, which was initially a fear I had until I went to an allergist and really got control of the situation. But in any case, if you were from the future, one of the things the main thing you would be coming back to the past, presumably, to do would be to change your own present. So you would want to make the physics of it would make you need to be as unlike what you really were as you possibly could. The more you were like something that never existed and never could exist, the more freedom of action you would have in the past, I think. And maybe what these things are constructions that they're created biological entities that never existed in our reality at all and are being sent back from the future in an attempt to make changes because maybe it's an end game for them. Maybe they are in a situation where they have no choice but to try to change the past in order to survive.
Which means it's an end game for us.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, we are at the beginning of the end game, and the way things are going, I mean, when we wrote Superstorm, hell, I thought we were 25 years away from where we are now.
Yes, I know. It is one of the more predictive books, I think, that has ever been written, and I get feedback on that daily. All right, well, let's move. Yeah, I'm sure. Let's move to the weather. It's very easy, Whit, when you're sitting here in the desert with cold winds screaming, for anybody, including myself, to say, global warming? Who are you kidding? It's absolutely freezing here. Now, I get that again and again. People say it's not real. How do you respond to them?
Well, what you have to look at is the weather extremes, and they are absolutely awesome. What is going on? Because what we're looking at, the media calls it global warming. What we are looking at is something that you and I in Superstorm called sudden climate change, and that's a much more accurate way of describing it. I'll give you an example. Today in Louisiana, 2 people were killed by tornadoes. They are worried about flooding in New Orleans again, not from a hurricane, but from massive thunderstorms. Now, here's the problem with that. It's January. It is not October. It is not April. This is not the season for that kind of weather in the United States, anywhere in the United States. The reason it's happening now in this country is that it's too warm down there. It's like autumn weather down there, and they have these northers blowing through and building up these huge thunderstorms at a time of the year when that shouldn't even be happening, but it is. And the kind of rains and flooding and the extraordinary storms that hit the Pacific Northwest this fall were completely off the wall. They were outside the record books.
I know, that's what keeps coming down here and whacking us. Now, with regard to New Orleans, that should be a spring occurrence, spring into or fall, but spring into early summer is typically, and then of course the fall. And what it is simply a collision of warm air and cold air. And at this time of year, that should be occurring far south of New Orleans, not as far north as New Orleans. So that means
not at all.
Yeah, that means there's warm air where it ought not be at this time of year.
That's right. And we have, like you look around the world at Australia. Right now in Australia, Western Australia, which is where Perth and so forth are, is enduring a spectacular storms from the remains of Typhoon Isabel that are just really hitting them hard. Meanwhile, Eastern Australia, Sydney and so forth, have got the worst drought they've maybe ever had. And those are the kinds of extremes that are just epidemic throughout the world. I mean, you saw, when you were in Manila, you saw one of those typhoons.
Oh, my God.
I mean, that's a country that takes 20 typhoons a year. They're used to it. But these were beyond, they were outside of the envelope, which is why...
Whitley, I watched things happen. I watched typhoons that were tropical storms one day and super typhoons the next day. No joke.
That's not unusual. That sort of thing is happening all over the world. Well, I'll give you an example. There's an El Nino taking place in the Pacific right now. That is supposed to be something that will cause it to get a lot drier in the Pacific Northwest. They are saying that this is the weirdest El Nino they have ever seen.
In what sense?
It's generating the most powerful Pineapple Express almost that they've ever seen. Huh. And it shouldn't be. It should be doing the opposite.
Well, when you and I originally wrote the book, scientists were extremely divided, and there was a lot of laughing and a lot of chuckling going on at the kind of thing that we predicted. Now, in the years between the writing of the penning of that book and now we have a situation where nearly all of the scientists agree. There's almost unanimous opinion that what we said is coming true. Not the superstorms yet, but the terrible global warming is now well underway, and I think there's almost no division on it anymore.
No, except for politics.
Oh, well.
There are people who have political agendas, and companies with, there's a lot of companies out there who are responding very positively to the problem. Like Walmart, for example, is going in a big way for low voltage electric lights, and that's important because that's a huge company, and it can make a big difference. So they do care, but there are other companies who basically fear that the way they do business will be changed in ways that are negative to them if people believe this. And so you have this fake debate on global warming when there is really no debate. The scientific results have been in for years, and the fact of the matter is that it is happening. Partly it's a natural cycle that we can't control. Partly, though, it has to do with this medium-sized volcano that keeps erupting all the time, 24 hours a day around the whole planet. It's called the human race. And all this fire that we burn in dozens of different ways, inside automobiles, inside our homes, this is all fire is what we use. This is what we live by. We live by fire. We are a fire-using and controlling species.
All right, hold it right there, Whitley. We're at a break point. A medium-sized one, huh? Medium-sized volcano. That would be us from the high desert. I'm Art Bell with Whitley Strieber. Does feel good to hear that again from the Kingdom of Nye. Whitley Strieber is my guest, and we're discussing the weather. And there really is something very, very, very much wrong with the weather. We'll get back to it if you'll just stay right where you are. All right. When I was in the Philippines, and as you know, I just got back, it was one storm, one typhoon after another, after another, after another. And as I mentioned, one day they would be tropical storms out to the east of us by 100, 150 miles. Next day, they would be super typhoons just headed straight at us. It was really, really frightening. Whitley, at the same time, there had been predicted an awful year for the East Coast, but it didn't happen. It all happened out in the Pacific. How did they get it so wrong?
Well, because we have gone beyond the edge in terms of the climate. The climate is no longer really predictable. It is chaotic. And all we can say about it is that it's going to do the unexpected. We do know that if the present hurricane cycle holds true, that there will be years with severe hurricanes in the future. In fact, the head of the National Hurricane Center just resigned after 34 years, and he's always been a kind of a soft-spoken guy, and he basically said that the southeastern United States is taking its life in its hands right now, that there could be a much worse storm than Katrina sometime in the next 10 years. He didn't quite say superstorm, but he came as close as you can without actually saying that word. So,
yeah, that word is filled with a lot of, I don't know what the right word for it is, but a lot of meaning, a lot of...
it's got a lot of weight, because when we started out, I mean, I remember going out on the radio, going out on TV and stuff and being scoffed at pretty much by people who I thought at the time were idiots, and I still do. And it was unpleasant for both of us. And what was astonishing, though, is to see the way the world weather systems began to set themselves up for just what we were afraid of.
I wonder how many people remember that interview that we did with Matt Lauer.
I don't know. I remember it, certainly. It was, God, this guy, I mean,
yeah.
What an arrogant man, my word.
He was, though, and you remember, Whitley, I had an opportunity to go back on the program, and I got him.
Yeah, that's right. You sure did. Yeah, that was beautiful.
Anyway, it's karma. So, yeah, everybody was laughing at it then. They're not laughing now. And as I said, they're kind of coming together on it. The question in everybody's mind, or most minds out there, is where do we go from here and how quickly?
Well, the thing is that it's happening so much more quickly than we thought. Like, we have the situation where the ice sheets the Antarctic ice sheet is becoming unstable. The Greenland glaciers are melting in just astonishing amounts of fresh water pouring into the whole Northern Ocean from Greenland every spring and summer. The extent of the polar ice cap is going. It's moving back so quickly, that much more quickly than we had expected. They're worried about whether or not polar bears can even survive, and we're looking in the lifetime of a lot of people in a situation where the summers are going to have no ice at all on the North Pole. And what this does to this planet is, in a word, it changes everything. But there is building in both North America and in Europe just what we feared, which is, like right now, just yesterday, was the first time there has been snow in the Alps this year. If you can imagine, you're going to Switzerland to ski in November and December, and there's no snow. It's unheard of. Unheard of. And yet, they're having this heat. And what is dangerous about this is Europe's weather is controlled by the Gulf Stream. And the Gulf Stream is pumping warm air up across the eastern United States, Newfoundland, eastern Canada, and then over into England and into Europe. It is controlled, or that was by 12 great flows of water, warm water being drawn up from the south into the colder northern water. And this what was pushing the Gulf Stream. The last time scientists looked at this, two of these great currents were still flowing. If they stop, then everything changes in a matter of...
Are you telling me that all but two, meaning how many of the currents actually stopped?
10.
10 of them stopped.
10 of them.
Only two continue.
Only two. And the Gulf Stream is much weaker than it used to be. It is weaker. And it's not going to stop suddenly. It's a massive, massive flow of water. But it will stop the way things are going now. And when it does, we are going to be in a situation where if these areas like Europe, where it is so warm now, they are going to be experiencing an extreme example of what just happened yesterday or is happening today in Louisiana, of a very, very intense weather systems developing and complex weather systems developing of a kind we really haven't seen before, but we do know exist. They happen. I'll tell you a little bit about when they have happened in the past.
Okay.
The Byrd Polar Research Institute has been examining glaciers in Peru, and they found a glacier, and this is true of a lot of the Peruvian glaciers. When you drill down to the bedrock below the glacier, what you find there is so astonishing. You find plants, temperate zone plants, like might be in your own backyard, not yours in the desert, but most of us.
Yes.
And quick frozen, like they freeze plants, like they freeze vegetables to sell them as frozen food. That frozen that fast. And then those glaciers, those plants are frozen a matter of 5 minutes or less, so much so that their cells are still intact. The leaves are still green.
Well, that means they froze instantly, virtually instantly, and they did not, and they never thawed out.
5,200 years after that day, they still have not thawed out. Now, we do not know what kind of a storm it is that comes up that causes things like that to happen. We know it exists because we can see its results.
It might have been a storm that initially did it, but it's a permanent or semi-permanent change that maintained it. Yeah.
That's the part we don't get. What could start with a storm where temperatures plummet over 5 minutes, and then 5,000 years later, a glacier is still sitting there? What did it? How did it work? We don't know, but we are tempting it again. Because if you look at that in Peru, then you move to Switzerland, and there was Ötzi, the Iceman. Remember, he was found when this glacier was melting a few years ago.
Yes. Yes.
And they found this Stone Age man with his completely perfect, his clothing and his everything was intact. He had been frozen and trapped in the glacier for all of those years, and then finally it thawed and they found the body. Now, he was moving through an alpine meadow, when it began to snow. He was injured and moving slow. He'd been attacked by somebody, and he had some wounds, and he was overtaken by the snow. You know when that happened? About 5,200 years ago. The same time this thing was happening in Peru, approximately. So what was it that filled that alpine meadow with snow that didn't melt until 10 years ago? What did it back then? This is what the kind of thing we really do need to find out. We don't know what climate change means. We don't know how powerful nature actually is. But we do know that there are things about nature and climate on this planet that are so much more powerful than anything we have experienced in recorded history. We better find out.
Is there any way to find out?
Well, I think so, and I think that we're really in a race. Are we going to figure this thing out and do what we can to control it in time or not? And part of it has to do with computer power. And it's not that people aren't trying. It's that we have lacked the computing power necessary to build climate models that really are predictive and that actually work, that would tell us answers to questions like this. But that's changing because the amount of computing power on this planet is growing exponentially every year. And we are getting to the point where there is enough concentration of memory to build these really complicated, really immense models with billions upon billions of data points, where you begin to do weather in these models that actually does come out like weather we're seeing around us. And that once we know that, we can start to understand this system a little bit more. But the problem is, as I said earlier, we're beyond the edge of the envelope right now. When you have weather events like we're experiencing on this planet right now, you're beyond the edge of the envelope. When you're talking about droughts that are unlike anything we've ever seen, an El Nino that works backwards, it's crazy. I mean,
Whitley, our own weather forecast here. I hesitate to even call it that. A friend and I were talking the other day and saying, it seems not so much like a weather forecast as it does weather observation. As it happens, they call it, and that's fine. But the forecast, even out a day or two, just doesn't seem to be working. It's more like they're observing and reporting.
Well, that's right. The forecasting element in a lot of different parts of the world is getting, well, like in England. They have, just a few weeks ago, they had a tornado in inland London.
Yes, London. I recall.
Yeah.
Now, how weird is that?
Well, it certainly wasn't predicted on there by the Met, that's for sure. No one predicted a tornado in London.
Right.
So,
right.
But it's the thing is, the other thing is that happens with people are thinking, well, there's nothing we can do about this.
I'm one of those people, Whitley. That's where you and I start to differ. If we figure it out, if we got enough computer power and we determined what kind of change was going on right now, my bet would be that we can't do a damn thing about it.
Well, I don't know if that's true or not. I think that we're going to experience a lot of climate change. There's no question about that. Whether or not we can do things like reduce, it doesn't take much to significantly reduce our carbon output, our CO2 output. A couple of years ago, about 10 years ago, the Canadian Prime Minister issued something called the Canadian Prime Minister's Challenge, which was they made a list of everything that you could do to reduce your carbon emissions, and it was really amazing what you could do. And we have on Unknown Country, if you click on the Quick Watch and go down to the bottom of the page, that's on the left side of the left column of the page, of the home page, you will find a list of simple things you can do. Like one of them, which is one of that Walmart has gotten involved in, as I said earlier, switch 2 standard light bulbs to fluorescence. You save 1,000 pounds of carbon emissions a year by doing that.
And a lot of money.
And a lot of money. And think if 100 million households throughout the Western world, and in places now, like in China, where they're organized enough to be able to do a thing like that, did it. That's an enormous, that alone.
Well, North America already, to be honest with you, Whitley, North America is not doing badly. We're doing a lot better, but we are only North America, and from a world perspective, we're a pretty little piece of the whole picture. Frankly, if you look at, for example, I just came from the Philippines. It's a mess. The air is a mess beyond what you can even imagine. Try going to Bangkok, where you can't breathe the air. China, where the industrialization is beyond all belief. A lot of Asia and a lot of Eastern Europe, absolutely a mess. So North America is not going, we might help. We're already helping. We're not doing badly. We're doing a lot better. But frankly, Whitley, in the rest of the world, it's a mess.
Well, you're right, Art, and it is a mess. And but at the same time, there are things that we can do, and I agree with you. I'll tell you, in the next hour, we're going to get into some astonishing information about the relatively distant past, about what can happen on this planet and what it can be like, and the larger scale of sort of where we are now and where we're going. That is of absolutely amazing stuff that's recently been discovered, but we have to try to do what we can, obviously. And there is the other side of the coin, and that is that the United States remains the largest. We generate more CO2 than any other country in the world per capita, even than China. I mean, because they're simply not as rich as we are. They don't
right
do as
now,
much
but they're catching up.
They're catching up very quickly. But there's two things happening. The country is also becoming better organized. I mean, there was a time, even 10 years ago, when you couldn't do anything to change things in China. But that's not true now. You can begin to reach people in China, and the Chinese government is beginning to show some concern about the levels of pollution in that country, because you're looking there at a country that could literally break down. I mean, its whole water infrastructure could fail already. There is literally no food grown in China that would be considered fit for human consumption in the United States, because it's so full of pesticides and pollutants.
Yes.
Now you think about that. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing that it would be that way.
I'm giving Walmart points too, but remember, Walmart is one of the biggest consumers of Chinese manufactured items in the world.
This is true, and at the expense of maybe of American workers as well.
Yes,
I know that, but there's a lot going on that's hopeful. But I'm not going to be a Pollyanna. I'm not going to, when I agree with you, I think we're going to go through a lot of change, and we're going to have this experience.
And we're going to have a little bit of a rest. We're at the top of the hour. We'll be right back. Whitley Strieber is my guest from the high desert. I'm Art Bell. Seasons don't fear the reaper. That's right, they don't. Interesting phenomena. As you know, I just got back from the Philippines, and there you're near the equator. And I had totally forgotten. I guess I adjusted. And, of course, my new wife had never been to a land where there were seasons before. And here at 4:30 or so, begins to get dark. Well, when you're at the equator, that doesn't happen. It's the same all year long, roughly the same time for the sun to come up in the morning, go down in the evening, and you come to North America, and oh my gosh, it's entirely different. And Aaron just couldn't believe it. The sun's going down, and it's getting cold already. When the sun goes down in the desert, it gets cold very quickly. Whitley Strieber is my guest. He's going to describe what's happened to our Earth in the past. Now, it's indeed the past, and it was the past when these medium-sized volcanoes really didn't have a whole lot to do with whatever the mixture was that created that giant change. That coming up in a moment. One very quick question before we dip into the distant past. Whitley, Iraq war plan and Saddam. President Bush said Thursday he wished the execution of Saddam Hussein had gone in a more dignified way. President Bush also said he'll make a speech next week announcing his long-awaited decisions about how to proceed in the unpopular war in Iraq. Considering more troops to deal with the rising violence in Baghdad, Bush said one thing's for absolute certain. He didn't say absolute, for certain, he said. I'll want to make sure the mission is clear and specific and can be accomplished. Something we should have done before we went in, right? Senior generals have cautioned against sending additional troops unless their role is well defined. Well, it's happened. In a day of ceremony and historic change, Representative Nancy Pelosi became the nation's first female House Speaker on Thursday, as Democrats eagerly took control of Congress for the final 2 years of the president's term, probably making life rather miserable for the president. Democrats are back, said Pelosi, and she immediately set the rank and file to work, passing tougher ethics rules. Energy Secretary Samuel Bodman on Thursday dismissed the chief of the country's nuclear weapons program because of security breakdowns at the Los Alamos, New Mexico lab and other facilities. The number of death sentences handed out in the U.S. dropped in 2006 to the lowest level since capital punishment actually was reinstated 30 years ago. Wow. Reflecting what some experts say is something. I've seen a number of her movies lately, and she's just a joy. Just an absolute joy. All right, listen, the webcam shot tonight is of Ms. Aaron Bell. Mrs. Aaron Bell, actually. Right here, taken a few hours earlier. And you'll notice she has a pillow covering her somewhat protruding stomach. Actually, she's not showing that much yet, but you can indeed begin to see it. So in a moment, in the next hour, Whitley Strieber is going to be here, and he's going to be talking about what Whitley and I have always talked about, and that is the weather. In a moment, we'll look at a little of the rest of the news, as Paul would say. Dateline Chicago. I love this. Federal officials say it was probably just some weird weather phenomenon. But a group of United Airlines employees swear they saw a mysterious saucer-shaped craft hovering over O'Hare Airport last fall. We're just hearing about this now. The workers, some of them pilots, so they'd know what they're seeing, right, said the object didn't have lights, and it hovered over an airport terminal before shooting up through the clouds, according to a report in Monday's Chicago Tribune. The Federal Aviation Administration acknowledged a United supervisor, in fact, had called the control tower at O'Hare, asking had anyone from the high desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be, continent to continent, across the oceans, all around the world. This program, Coast to Coast AM, covers every bit of the territory around the world, one way or the other. Good evening, I'm Art Bell, filling in for George Norrie, taking a well-deserved night off. And let me give you fair warning ahead of time. We're going to do something a little bit special tonight. And what I'm going to do is hold it until the second half hour so that those of you who would like to record it, actually it's only a piece of it. It kind of went on and on. It is, and we have never replayed this to the best of my knowledge, it is the infamous, if you will, a story of a man who flew over Area 51. And I think this occurred back in 1997. Now, that's just my best guess, but I think it was 97. And you've just never heard anything like it in your life. It's about almost 12 minutes long. And I know a lot of people have been wanting to record this or get a copy of it one way or the other. So the network was kind enough after somebody requested. This is by request. Somebody called the show last week and requested that we dig it up and play it, and so we shall. We'll make it in the second half hour here. Let's take a brief look at the depressing world news. President Bush talks about there is a growing fear that the criminal justice system will make a tragic and irreversible mistake. Executions fell to the fewest in a decade. President Bush has chosen a 25-year intel veteran, Vice Admiral Mike McConnell, to be our nation's second national intelligence director, as he reshapes national security strategy with 2 years left in his presidency. In a case fraught with ethical questions, this story is really weird. The parents of a severely mentally and physically disabled child have stunted her growth to keep their little pillow angel a manageable and more portable size. The bedridden 9-year-old girl had her uterus and breast tissues removed at a Seattle hospital and received large doses of hormones to halt her growth. She is now 4'5". Her parents say she would otherwise probably reach a normal 5'6" or so. J-Lo honored by People Espanol. And she deserves it. I really like Jennifer Lopez. I always have. She's among entertainers selected by People Espanol for its 100 Most Influential Hispanics issue, which honors those who have made an impact in the Hispanic community. Lopez, who graces the cover of the magazine's February issue on newsstands Friday, says, quote, "Being an example to others is a big part of my work." And I must say, she really spotted a spinning disc-shaped object, but the controllers didn't see anything. And a preliminary check of radar found nothing out of the ordinary. Quote, "Our theory on this is it was a weather phenomena," said Corey. He's a FAA spokeswoman, actually, Elizabeth Corey. "The night was a perfect atmospheric condition in terms of low cloud ceiling and lots of airport lights. When the lights shine up into the clouds, why, sometimes you can see funny things," said she. "The FAA shall not investigate," said she. United spokeswoman Megan McCarthy said company officials don't recall discussing any such incident from November 7th. There's a lot of non-recollection there, isn't there? In the months of October, November, and December of 77, and during the first half of 78, the Brazilian state of Pará, is it Pará? Has been invaded, I would think Pará, has been invaded by UFOs. And it was not simply sightings. Nothing to do with mysterious lights wandering at high altitudes, more about bright objects in several shapes and sizes flying over the Bay region at low altitude, just, in fact, meters above the trees and firing strong beams of lights at people. The people harmed by the phenomena, one of the most important ones of the world's ufology studies, and still, in fact, being researched nowadays, gave